Look at all this glorious kale I have growing here. Today, we're going to chat about kale and what you can do with your massive amounts of kale that you've grown. There are so many recipes out there that include kale in them. You can make kale chips, you can do a frittata or a quiche, you can add kale into all sorts of salads. Just chop up your kale and whack it into your salad. You can add them into sauces, which is one thing I like to do. So when I'm making up either a vegetable sauce or a bolognese sauce or any sort of sauce at all, I will add in some kale when I have it growing in the garden. You can also whack it into soups or into fried rice or stir fries. You can also make green smoothies with your kale, and you can use your kale as a substitute to spinach in any spinach recipes that you have. And you can also add kale into most egg dishes. But one thing I like to do when I have a lot of kale growing in my garden is to dehydrate it and make a green powder. Now, I make all sorts of different green powders. I make ones just fully kale because I know that I don't have to cook it as much. But when I'm using other greens like the leaves of broccolis or cabbages or cauliflowers, I want to be able to cook those powders. So I will label those as a green powder and the kale as a separate powder. Now, for the first time, I have purchased some Mylar bags, and I'm now storing lots of things in Mylar bags, but I'm also storing my green powders so that I have a long shelf life for these greens that I have taken time to dehydrate and turn into a powder. This green powder that I make, I like to add into a lot of things. So similar things to what I've already suggested you can put your kale into. So you could put it into a soup, you could put it into smoothies, you could put it into sauces, and you could also add it into omelets or pancakes. Make yourself some green pancakes or waffles. You can make some green waffles with your green powder that you have made. So making your own powder is a fantastic way to use up your greens. Now, of course, when we're eating the kale fresh, straight from the plant, we are getting the most nutrients out of this vegetable. By dehydrating it, we are lessening the nutrients in it. The best way to preserve food and keep all that nutrients is freeze drying. And this is something that I really want to do one day. I want to be able to buy a freeze dryer, but not only that, we're not going to be able to run it on our off-grid solar system here. So we're going to have to sort out a resolution to that issue that we have. But dehydrating it, you're going to have some of the nutrients there. At least you're capturing it rather than letting these leaves go yellow and then having to discard them into the compost. Of course, it does build good compost as well, but we want to get as much as we can out of all this effort we've spent into growing these vegetables into our bodies. So we want to get the best out of these. So I highly recommend having a go at making a green powder by chopping up the leaves quite small and then dehydrating them. It usually takes a day or two, depending on what time of the year I'm in, because we can only run the dehydrators while the sun is out. It can take a couple of days over the winter months, but I will dehydrate them and then I'll throw them in my Thermomix. You can use a blender or a food processor and make those dried leaves into a powder. Now, to tell when the leaves have dried enough, you just crack it in half, and if it breaks really cleanly and sharply, then it is dry enough. You want to make sure that they're dry before you make them into a powder. There are other things that I dry and make into powders, like some of my weeds. I will do dandelion leaves. I will dry them and make them into a powder. I could do chickweed as well, which I have a lot of in my garden right now. I also like to make a powder out of my mint. And if you have peppermint, that's a great one to make as well. So you can put a little bit of that mint powder into something that you're making and it will have a minty, fresh flavor. I love to add mint into my smoothies, but also peppermint or mint as well go really nicely in a raw slice. Yum. If you have any other suggestions on what to do with kale, any other recipes that you recommend, please do comment down below. Now, let's go and harvest my first broccoli of the season. Okay, friends, I've got a few broccolis here, but there's one. Here it is. This one's starting to sprout a bit. So here's my first broccoli, and I would dehydrate these leaves. You can also put these small leaves into stir fries and all sorts. But how good is that? I've harvested my first broccoli in May. That's incredible. I think it's due to having this amazing sunny autumn weather that we've been having. I hope you've enjoyed this little video and that you give making your own green powders a go. See you next time, friends. There's a bug on the camera. Excuse me, bug.